This is Season 3, Episode 6 of my modular journey, and today we're going to take a look at the Doepfer A-198 TRC, or Trautonium Ribbon Controller. This is just one piece of it. I have another piece down here on the desktop, which is the actual ribbon controller hardware itself, and of course it comes with this little USB connector, which we'll talk about in a moment. The A-198 Trautonium Ribbon Controller came in around the middle of August of 2022, and it costs around $290. The build is pretty nice. It seems kind of lightweight, like there's not a whole lot going on here. This may actually be the first Doepfer module I own that doesn't have jumpers. The Trautonium has a wonderful history. Invented by Friedrich Trautwein in the 1930s, this machine consists of two subcomponents, the controller and the sound generator. The original controller was a thing they called the manual, which I understand to be the thing you touch that generates voltages, and there was a foot switch. The Trautonium itself was based on yet another early 20th century design called the band manual. I have links to all this in the description below if you're interested in more details. The Trautonium controller was a non-conductive string wrapped in a resistive wire, mounted a few centimeters above conductive plates. The string's isolating terminals were then connected to voltage sources, and when small pressure was applied to the string, an electronic connection was made between the isolating terminal and the conductive plate, generating the flow of electricity, just a couple of volts. Varying voltage levels were produced depending on where you placed your finger on the string. Sounds exactly like the modern ribbon controllers, huh? Let's move on from the mostly unfulfilling history lesson. The Doepfer 198 TRC consists of a similar ribbon controller that acts according to the position you touch with your finger, as well as pressure sensitivity for pitch shifting or adding filter volume control, etc. As an example, as you slide your finger down the ribbon, the lower voltages are produced. Up the ribbon, higher voltages are produced. If the ribbon is being used for pitch voltage to an oscillator, the effect is the pitch going down and up respectively. This is non-quantized, by the way, so sliding up and down sounds like a slew or portamento unless you involve a quantizer. Furthermore, if you press down on the ribbon at any point and you're using a CV out of pressure, which we'll talk about later, you can add control over any number of devices that accept CV, such as cutoff on a filter or a CV gate on a VCA. The possibilities are very exciting, which is exactly why I picked up the 198 TRC. The module itself is what derives the control voltages based on the finger position and the pressure on the ribbon controller. Connected via a USB cable, the module itself has two sections, position and pressure. Let's look at the position section real quick here. This section has two outputs. It has a CV, the voltage generated, and a gate, high when the ribbon is touched and low when the ribbon is released. Gate is also overridden by the hold switch. When in the off position, it closes the gate when you release the ribbon, and when hold is on, the gate stays open even after you release the ribbon controller. This can be useful if you're using the ribbon as a filter cutoff controller, for example. Sweep to a position, and when you let go, the position stays there and doesn't jump back to zero. And there's also a scale knob here, which like most modules just means how wide the range of voltage is generated by the lowest point of the ribbon versus the highest. I have a note here that when the scale is turned up fully, the ribbon can produce voltages between 0 and 9 volts. 9 seems rather odd, but that's quite a range. Also, the TRC is unipolar, not bipolar. To generate negative voltage, an attenuverter would be needed to offset by -5 midway. Here's the pressure section. While making swooping pitch yowls with the ribbon is fun, the part I enjoy the most is the pressure and what you can do with it. The A-198 module's pressure section has similar outputs. It has also a CV and a gate. The CV output generates voltages between 0 with no pressure and 9.5 volts with full pressure. That seems to depend on where you're pressing precisely. We'll cover some of those examples later. With such a wide voltage range, it seems sensitive in my testing where exactly you need the tip of your finger position to get the 9.5 volt max. Or the ribbon itself has is this wide gap here in the very center, and pushing down as hard as you can without breaking it is where you're supposed to get that 9.5. But if you're up a little bit, like up on the edges, you're not going to get that full voltage. I think that's what I was talking about in my note here. There's a gate out for pressure as well, for those instances where you want to control the application of the CV generated with pressure by gating it overall. Example, if you use pressure to control a filter's cutoff frequency, the CV out of the pressure section could go to a DC coupled VCA first, so you can then further attenuate and control that pressure amount. So now you could gate that VCA from the 198 as well, so the cutoff only changes when pressure is applied and the threshold has been exceeded. Things with modular can become very complex very quickly, but the fact that you can do so many things, almost anything you can imagine, is what keeps me going down this very deep rabbit hole. Why I chose the Doepfer A-198 TRC? Well, are there any other eurorack ribbon controller modules at all? Well, of course there are. But the Doepfer TRC first showed up way back when I was researching Sinfonion on Der Man mit der Maschinen's channel, and seeing how Matias Kettners uses one in live performance through Sinfonion for scale quantization. His work is brilliant. You should check it out if you haven't already. I didn't even bother looking at other ribbon controller modules, I'm sorry to you other guys, because I'm a huge fan of Doepfer gear, mainly because it's solid, well constructed, generally very basic and straightforward, and inexpensive. Granted, some of their premium modules get up there, like the Quad VCO, for example, but you can build a really functional Eurorack system like the A100 on the cheap. How I plan to use the A198, as I was mentioning in the description, there are many different ways of using a ribbon controller in your system. If you've ever owned a commercial synth with a ribbon on it, you know you can send it to any number of parameters in your synth, like pitch, filter, volume, effects. The same and much more are true for modular, because the A198 TRC generates voltage. This means anything that could take a voltage as a modifiable parameter can benefit from the TRC. Let me get this in the rack while you go take out the trash like your mother asked you to. All right, the A198 is in the rack. Before I power it up, let's plug in this USB cable to the top here. So this comes out of here, and then the other end just goes into the ribbon controller. So the first thing I want to show off is the CV out of position with a scale of 5. I was having a bit of a perplexing problem that I couldn't identify, so I had to shut off the camera and go figure out what the hell was going on. And that thing is using an LED cable, because I thought I was going to show you what things looked like with blinky lights, putting the scale all the way up to the maximum range possible. Watch what's happening on data here, the green trace. I hit the ribbon at the lowest, and of course I get 0.24 volts or something, but as I raise it, the maximum amount of voltage I was getting was 4 volts. So 0 to 4 volts. And I know this Trautonium puts out 9 volts because that's what the documentation says. So I was trying to figure out why this was happening. I have no idea. And this is the first time in 18 months that I've noticed that the LED cable itself probably has a little bit of a limitation of voltage, because I don't know. I mean, I have to go look this up, because would lighting an end of an LED cable take half of your voltage away? I don't know, because now if I come over here and I plug in a not LED cable back into the same source, so now if I press the bottom note, you can see it's way down there at 0.04, if you can see that on the Canon. And then as I raise it, as I slide up the ribbon, the voltage climbs pretty quickly. Now we're all the way up at the top. We're at, what is that? 8.93 volts. Can't get much higher than that. So that is our 9-volt sweep. So that's a thing I literally just learned today as I'm demonstrating this module to you. So I wonder how many times I've used LED cables in my patches before, thinking they're blinky and pretty, not being aware that they're actually stifling half of my voltage. So I don't know if that's actually true. If you, the viewer, know what the hell's going on, please drop a comment down there and tell me what is going on with LED cables sucking up my voltages. All right, So now that the mystery is solved, let's move back to our audio demo. The first thing I want to show is the position CV, which I have this black cable going to data. Again, you just saw me sliding up and down the ribbon showing the slewed voltage because it's unquantized, and it's a 0 to 9 volt. Now I'm going to plug in the gate. So with the gate also plugged in, you can see when I tap the ribbon at all, the blue trace here is the gate, so it shows the gate opening and closing, and you can see on the LEDs on the module itself that position is being engaged. So let me flip up some volumes here real quick. So that super low rumble is the lowest voltage possible out of the A111-4 quad VCO I'm using as a demo. So now if I touch the ribbon, wherever I touch it, the voltage jumps to that, whatever that representative note is. And I have the scale set all the way up still, so it's pretty high. You want to piss off some dogs? All right, so with that in mind, now I'm going to take the next part of this was to just take the gate. So the gate out of the TRC up here is going into data right here, and then out of the data, we're going to see the CV on the VCA. So now, when I touch the ribbon, the gate opens and then closes. So the last thing to really demonstrate is what the scale knob does, and that is if you heard this is max voltage. So if I drop it down to about 50%, I'm just going to hold the topmost note here and then turn down scale. So if you wanted something nice and tight, so maybe you turn up your oscillator, you want just a small range. All right, so for the last piece of this, I wired up really quickly the CV out of pressure into data over here, which is the red channel. So you'll see that on the third line down, red channel. So now when I press the note, and now if I apply pressure, so that's probably the only use I'm going to have for it is playing with filter control. And of course there's a threshold of sensitivity too, so it doesn't go too crazy. So now we throw in our beautiful reverb. So you see, you can get pretty expressive if you're rolling your finger along the board. I'm going to link at the end of this video. I'll link to a film I did when I first got the Trautonium called Dark Skies. I'll tack on a little sample at the end of this video, but then I'll link to the full sonic experiment to kind of just now show you. Let's wrap all this stuff up and show you how I used this. Also, you can set pressure to pitches as well, so you can get you can simulate a vibrato versus a tremolo. Or wah. Anyway, I'm just going to wrap this up here. That was Season 3, Episode 6 of my modular journey, the Doepfer Trautonium ribbon controller, the A-198 module, the manual, its little USB cable, and featuring all the Doepfer gear at the top. Coming up next, a whole slew of Doepfer modules. starting with the A-178 theremins. So stay tuned for that.